Okay, so I'm gonna name some areas that I've tried in a summary kind of way, and maybe later on do more expanded videos on them depending on whether I feel it's needed or depending on your feedback. So today I would say that my favorite approach is being conscious of my breathing. Now, I remember taking a workshop about 25 years ago about dealing with stress, and it was, I don't know, 6 weeks course or something. And they were explaining so much different stuff, and the biology of stress and all of that. And at the end, the facilitator was like, look, in his opinion, breathing was the most important thing. And it was like, it's free and it's simple. And something in me at the time did not give it a lot of value. Maybe because my intellectual mind needed something more complex for me to disentangle, like Sherlock Holmes shit, man. Because some of that, at that time, I was attracted to some of the analytic approaches. But this was like breathing, and it was like, well, we do it anyway. Anyway, look, since then, I've experimented a lot with breathing, and I discovered that it's a huge field. For example, in yoga, there's a whole discipline about various types of breathing approaches, and I've learned the hard way as well that exposing myself to some of these approaches, going to a workshop on breathing that comes from a yoga discipline, like about a couple of years ago, I did this, and I was trying to explain, it was 2 Sundays, 2 mornings, and I was trying to explain to the facilitator, dude, I have a history of trauma, and so I'm just gonna I might need to leave the room or whatever. And he was like, oh, no. All the approaches that, that I'm going to be sharing with you, they're actually straightforward. And he introduced us to quite a few different approaches, one is from the diaphragm, and one is from trying to breathe and hold the breath. Man, I think it fucked me up for a while. So the lesson is, there are a lot of approaches out there that looked really simple, like breathing and like meditation, for example, where if the facilitator does not have experience in trauma, they might encourage it in such a way, not knowing that the field of trauma is actually different than the field of working with people who haven't had trauma. So in my case, quite a few those breathing approaches that I've tried ended up messing me up. Again, everything is trial and error, so I just learned it the hard way, So today, my favorite approach is lying in bed. And this is something that I've cultivated in the last 10 years more consciously. And I've bought quite a few books on different breathing approaches. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of stuff out on YouTube. Again, it's the word of caution here. But what worked for me is to close my eyes and just at first just notice the breath. Develop a relationship to the breath. With time, just watch the inflow and the outflow. And today, I don't hold my breath. There's the Wim Hof stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there. I'm cautious of, like the Wim Hof, there's immersing your body in really cold water. Not for me, man. Cold shower for some people is invigorating. Cold shower for me is like, fuck off. My body is like screams at cold water. So for me, my favorite approach, and it's individual, is to just notice the breath and then check in, is this working or not? Not hold the breath. I've learned different techniques, like, if you put your tongue on top of, you can try to regulate the out breath. There are benefits to that, But the simplest one is literally just taking in a breath and letting it out without holding. And I remember on one occasion where during the court cases, the divorce case, I remember I had an issue with my legal team, and I was so triggered by an approach of somebody in the team. It was just too intense for me. It was really triggering me. And that person I recognized as meaning well, but it wasn't working for me. It was too much, and I was trying to figure out, how do I communicate with them? How do I tell them your approach? I know you think you're preparing me for the court case on the day to deal with the judge and with the other legal team. I know you. I do feel that you're being ethical with me and prioritizing my situation here, but it's not working for me. And I was all jumbled up about it. And I remember being in bed, trying to figure out, I need to write them a letter, not knowing what to think, noticing that I'm being so defensive when I'm thinking about them, and not knowing what to say, and then doing this breathing exercise slowly. Even when I'm saying slowly, there's a certain forcing to it. But that was a specific situation. That was what I would describe as a threat situation, as opposed to working on my breath in times of calmness. And after 20 minutes, suddenly my intellect cleared. It was like, fuck, I'm going to write down, suddenly I started to know I need to say this and this and this and this. And I started to writing it down on my phone, because I knew that that state, I managed to break through it only after, I managed to get clarity after 20 minutes. And that's not going to last. And I'm going to go back to defensive thinking, and I'm going to go back to cloudy head. So that was a situation where I was forcing it. I saw the benefits of it. I did utilize the best out of it in taking the notes. It did help me. But it was also not an approach that I would use the rest of the time, because the rest of the time breathing is calming to the system when it's not forced. So the summary of all the area of breath work is that there is so much out there. Some of it can be disruptive if there's a history of trauma. It works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. There are reasons for why it doesn't work, so try not to force it. So when was the last time I did any breath work? Not very recently. But look, it's it's there. It's there for me. Sometimes it's just like a minute is enough, and sometimes not at all. Sometimes just wait. Yeah, that's breath work. Another area is diet. So I'm differentiating now between diet as in constricting what I'm eating and losing weight, and there is so much out there, and we still have not figured out what is the best diet for any person because of the individual differences. And again, that's the point that I keep on emphasizing. There are so many books out there in relation to everything you can think about, in terms of application, whether it's diet, whether it's breath work, whether it's spirituality, whether it's analysis, there's so much out there. My point is that at the end of the day, it's trial and error. You need to figure out what works for you. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So diet, about 20 years ago, when I was separating, from my first wife and my daughter there, and my reality is that I consulted with a dietitian, and she was like, look, I'm going to highly recommend you go off wheat, dairy products, red meat, and preservatives. That was extremely difficult. There are some tests you can do. Some of them are reliable, some are not. So I'm cautious about what to share, what to recommend, and how this is interpreted. But for the sake of brevity, for the sake of just now, stress has a way of affecting the digestive system. And I noticed that sometimes when I go on holidays, the first day I'm there, I can almost eat anything I want and it's going to be okay and I don't bloat. And then next day when something, some of the intolerances come back. In my case, it's mainly intolerances, So it's been a long process of trying to figure out what foods are good and what foods are not. It's a long process of seeing food as medication. It's a long process of, unfortunately, during stressful times, I end up comfort eating. I ended up eating foods that I know is going to mess me up. And there are times when I just ended up putting on weight. I remember like 12 years ago, I remember about 12 or 13 years ago, I had put on a lot of weight over time. And then suddenly, slowly feeling, oh, I'm feeling better. I'm going to try to lose weight. And I managed to lose 27 kilos in like 9 months. It just happened that I was able to do it. There are times which I can't, or I try to restrict what foods I eat, and I end up being triggered. I ended up, I don't know, does it trigger a starvation response? Sometimes, but during that 9 months, I was doing Pilates, I was running, and I was doing basketball, and I started to really enjoy losing weight. I started to be able to tolerate hunger. I started to be able to sleep while hungry, and I started to feel great about it. Eventually, I went down to 78 kilos or something, which I thought was too thin. And now thinking back, I'm like 6'1.5". I think 85 is ideal. 85 kilos would be ideal for me. And then a whole lot of shit happened, divorce case and all that stuff. And I started to put back, weight on. And then, I don't know, man, like 7 years later, I gave it a shot at losing weight again. I started going to a different dietitian in Lebanon. And I started losing, I don't know, maybe I lost some 15 kilos there. But that diet was very harsh, even though, I loved the person. I loved where she was coming at it. I lost the weight, but again, there were other stresses, more shit, more life stuff. And I, again, put on more weight. And now, for the past 2 months, I feel like giving it a shot at losing weight again. And I have two approaches. What I did 13 years ago, which was restrict carbs at night, but eat carbs in the morning, eat porridge in the morning. And then the second diet was intermittent fasting. So don't eat at all in the morning, And now for me, I tried the second one first and it didn't work. I was getting an ugly type of hunger that it was very difficult to sit with. And I was like, okay, fuck it. I'm going to try the first one because it worked and I was doing it on my own. And I managed so far to lose, I don't know, maybe 5.5 kilos in the last 2 months. It would be really nice if I don't get a lot of stress and more life shit and I keep on losing weight and eventually like the look of myself in the mirror. Vanity. It's not like vanity. I did enjoy looking at myself not having weight, but it also felt much better. And there's a head clarity to it. There's a lot of benefits to it. My body flowed better. I was more in my body. Again, all I can do is try, and it just works out to me, for me now, that harsh approaches don't work for me over time. So I'm just going with the flow. If I keep on losing weight, it would be great. If life doesn't give me a lot of extra stressful shit, hopefully I'll just keep on going. So the area of diet is very personal. When I can lose weight and when I can watch, it really depends on external circumstances. Ideally, I have a weight in mind. Have maybe a cheat meal a week. Make sure, on some level, it feels joyful. So that's the common theme to all the approaches, really, is gentleness, and try to have some fun, unless there's a situation in life where I have a responsibility towards somebody else that I care about, or a situation I need to override how I feel and say, fuck it, I'm going to do this because it's necessary. I know I'm going to be in a lot of pain after this. And hopefully I don't have many of these situations, so no regrets about those times that I had to do this. But the summary is gentle approach, try to have some fun. So there is so much stuff or approaches out there that I've tried, and I kind of now categorize them in different ways. Like, for example, yoga. It's good for me to know that there are so many different approaches in yoga. Some of them you hold the pose. Now it's, like 20 years ago, there aren't that many books on yoga explaining different approaches, but there's so much out there today. There's like Bikram yoga that, today doesn't attract me, So the most important thing in introducing a new approach or trying to learn a new approach, for me now, the most important thing is the facilitator, the vibe. It seemed like in school, I didn't like the chemistry teacher. I didn't like him at all. And I didn't like his teaching style either. I didn't like him as a person or his teaching style. And I'm not, I didn't do well in chemistry. And it feels like a shame because that's an area, while in math, I had an amazing teacher, Khalid Abbas. He was like just an artist, man. He was amazing. I ended up becoming best friends with his son, and like the way he described math, you like fall in love with it, So with yoga, it's good to know how many different approaches are out there. It's good to find out which suits me. It's good to differentiate that certain classes might work for me when there are other people out, in the class. But it's good to know how am I experiencing the vibe of the people in the class. That could be one thing. The facilitator's vibe is another. The style itself is another. It's good to know these differences because with time, and good to know there's an option that a facilitator can come to my place. That's another option as well. It could be more expensive. And it's also good to know that, like anything else, yoga worked for me for certain periods of time, but if I'm under a lot of stress, then it feels like a lot of work. It feels like I'm forcing myself to be in my body, and I can end up with injuries there, So that's one area, yoga. Another area is martial arts. I recognize that since being a baby, I was in situations where there is fear around me, whether it's fear from my mom or my dad or whatever. and then later on the Civil War, and then the court cases feeling vulnerable, and I mean during the Civil War in Lebanon, that scene in Taxi Driver where Robert De Niro is looking in the mirror, is like, what are you looking at, kind of thing. Are you looking at me? Are you looking at me? That classic scene, And I watched Taxi Driver when I was a teenager. I saw it in London, I think, But anyway, look, there were so many situations during the Civil War, when I was growing up in Tripoli, or I would go to Beirut, and I would see somebody with a gun, and he was like, and he would look at me, and I would realize I do not have the option of saying, what the fuck are you looking at? That option of pushing back and feeling my monkeyness, which can feel empowering and grounding, I did not have the option. Well, I mean, it was there, but fuck that if I'm going to say it to somebody with a gun. So to grow up in that kind of environment, there's an eroding of a sense of masculinity. Well, I guess it doesn't have to be just masculinity. I mean, hopefully you wouldn't, it's not about gender. When I say masculinity, it's about feeling the primal animal ability to push back, and growing up in that environment, having to shut down that primal impulse, like, Sami, do not tell them to go fuck themselves. That would not be a good thing, I mean, that was an adaptive thing. It was the wise thing to do. I'm glad I didn't, So I stayed conscious of all that stuff. And eventually I learned about different types of martial arts, and I recognized there is so much anger in me, that I would like to, feel I've got a physical skill, although a physical skill would be fuck all of use in a situation when somebody has a gun, But the point is to educate myself about different approaches that can help me get a sense that I can defend myself, while at the same time being conscious that this won't work all the time. I mean, even if I had a gun, if somebody has another gun, is it wise to fuck with them? Not that I want to have a gun and fuck with somebody who doesn't have a gun, and be cautious of that. Be cautious of that tendency of, well, fuck it, my turn now to prove myself, fuck that shit, I mean, I actually remember somebody at the age of 17, a friend of ours came over to the house and was like, guys, so he said to me, my brother, let's go, I've got something for you. And it's like, so we go over to this secluded area and he takes out a gun. In Lebanon during the Civil War, like, anybody can get a gun. He was like, here, try it. And there's nobody nearby. And I held the gun, and man, I felt the power of that gun, and he's like, okay, just go ahead and shoot something. I don't remember if I shot something or not, but that's like giving an opportunity to feel like a gorilla multiplied by 100. I felt the power of the primal and what it can do. And I felt that the thirst for blood in me. I felt like a savage. I felt the energy of darkness. And I was like, I'm okay, thank you. So that's all part of body work. That's all part of working with having a need to defend myself. So then, not a gun, although some choose a gun, not for me, because it doesn't sit well with my spirit, and it wakes up parts of me that I don't want to wake up and feed, I mean, there's a classic fable about, American Native Indian, where somebody says to an elder, there's a bad wolf and there's a good wolf in me, how do I deal with them? And the answer is, well, whichever you feed gets bigger, So that's something I've been conscious all my life of, I mean, that was an early introduction to darkness, and the darkness of primal, the darkness of, well, what kind of embodiment do I want? Do I want to be so strong that I can beat somebody else? Yeah, but I don't want to hurt somebody else. So all of these things are not simple, you know. And I remember trying to find out about different types of martial arts, and coming, a friend of mine, Colin, who's, he's, I don't know, Colin is karate 3 dan or something, black belt, 3 or 4, maybe 4. Anyway, so he Colin introduced me, it's like he told me about Aikido. And basically Aikido has a spiritual discipline to it. Some martial arts are so offensive, meaning that you've got an attacker, learn to beat the shit out of them and completely disable them. That doesn't suit me. Well, he was like, Sami, you might like Aikido because it has a spiritual discipline to it, which is, it's completely defensive. And the purpose of it is to frustrate your attacker to the point that they give up. So you don't attack them at any one point. They just keep on attacking you, and you keep on learning the skill of diverting that energy, I did it for a while, and then other shit happened, and I got distracted from that. I'm not sure if I was enjoying that particular class either, but 15 years later, I ended up, now living in Lebanon, and I came across, I was doing basketball with a friend of mine, and he was like, look, I can't do this, I'm getting very busy. And I said, okay, I need to keep on working on sweating. And he was like, I said, I'd like martial arts, but the most important thing of whatever martial art it is, that I like the person. I care more about that than anything else. I need a positive engagement. And I don't really care about whether eventually I'll be really good at this. I don't give a shit about competitions. I'm literally trying to work with depression and trauma by strengthening myself to give myself a sense that I can defend myself. Plus, I need to sweat, So I'm just realized I said I was going to just summarize. Okay, so I'm not summarizing. I'm really delving into each one of these. Okay, so, whatever, man. Anyway, so for the sake of this, I ended up meeting a really amazing, his name is Rocky Kiblewi. And he's got an amazing smile, man. He was like sunshine. And he's so positive and funny. We became friends very quickly, and initially we were doing just a lot of, the session would be, like a mixture of just loosening the body and then punching the punch bag. But eventually he was like, you know what? It's time to spar. Spar is like when you hit with the other person, So first time I managed to hit him, and this guy is like really good. I think he's amateur world champion, So first time I managed to land a punch on his face. Not, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. And he was like, dude, in the ring, I don't know my mother. Hit me, And there were a few times when I managed to hit him. And there was one occasion where it's like, it turns out that I have a strong punch, and my hands are kind of quite tall in relation to my legs, So on one occasion, I hit him on the nose, and it was like, it was blood, and he was smiling. He says, yeah, good for you, But in all of this, I actually got a taste of enjoying hitting him, and that didn't sit well with me either. He was like, look, if you can actually go into a real match, and I think you have a good chance. I didn't want to go there, because I actually am in contact with, I have a sense of how much anger there is in me. There's a fucking reservoir of vicious anger that I've all my life been trying to sit on top of, because overall I want to be loving and I believe in that. But having taken a lot of punches in life, metaphorical punches, emotional punches, there's all of that shit in me. And at the moment, I don't feel like putting myself in a situation where I could hit somebody and hurt them. I just don't want to do that, man. So, like anything else, I'm experimenting. I haven't done that for a while. In doing my film, I stopped a lot of stuff, a lot of physical work. So, martial art. And personally, I do feel like personally today, I do feel that as a male, as a human being, I am not that grounded, and I am not anchored that I can have the skill to defend myself physically, while at the same time feeling I can, and I can hurt somebody really bad. So I'm just saying it's out, this is there's no resolution to this. I'm not sure there'll ever be a resolution to this, but I'm just saying that there is anger in me, and there's also this feeling that I feel physically not strong, while at the same time feeling I can do a lot of damage. They're both there, Call it what it is, whatever it is. Another area is sport. That's different than martial art, So with sport, like, what am I now, 57? When I hit about 40, I ended up meeting a friend that I went to school with that I love. I know him since I was 7, and he ended up being in internal medicine. Nasser is his name. I love the guy. I trust him, and we haven't seen him in ages. And I sit down and we meet in Beirut, and I explain all the shit that I've been through and how much I've worked on my depression, how far I've come. And he was like, you know what? I hear how far you've come, but in your case, I'm going to recommend you take medication. And medication does not solve your issues. I'm recommending it as a break for 1.5 years, so that you set up maybe a better social circumstances. You have more time to do other stuff. It will give you a break from doing all of this internal work. And eventually you'll get off the medication and you'll go back to facing all of that stuff, but at least you would have created some social resources around you. And I was like, maybe not, because as a psychologist, as somebody who went into psychology, very early on, I recognize I have so many traumas that I know are traumas that need to be worked with, and I wanted to work through them. And I deeply believed in the field of psychology and therapy and all of that, therapies, all different types. I believed in taking the path of working on myself, And I wasn't comfortable with medication because because medication, the way I saw it at the time, is that even if it does work, I doubt that it's going to work with the long run. I can't be on medication forever. And I know it's going to have side effects. So it's not going to be perfect. And at the same time, I felt, no, this stuff is concrete. I know there are a lot of emotional, psychological shit that I literally need to go through. And I was very interested in the field of psychology and believed in the potential of it. So there was a sense of, no, I want to fix myself by myself. Now, I'm not against medication in a general way as a psychologist. There are situations where some people will like, look, I don't want to I don't do this therapy inner work. You just give me the medication. So, in which case I'm a psychologist, I don't give medication, they can go to somebody else. And I can see also that if somebody is psychotic or somebody is, going through a crisis, they might be in danger to themselves or to others, medication might be a good idea, But for me, I was like, I'm not sure about it. But at the same time, I have done so much work on myself, and I was feeling, man, this still, I've come a long way, but this is still very painful, And I was going to a spiritual healer at the time, which I liked a lot, and I still like. I saw it for about 20 years. And can talk about it some other time. And I kind of shared this with her, like, look, my friend Nasser, I trust him. I like his approach as a doctor. He's not pushing shit on me. I kind of like the way he's thinking about it. Plus, I'm tired. And she was like, Sami, you're nearly there. So I have one last suggestion for you. And if it doesn't work, then take medication if you want. By the way, I still haven't taken medication. That was like 17 years ago. So anyway, her suggestion was to sweat. Do something physical that makes me sweat. And that's what took me into the area of sports. I used to like playing basketball as a kid. A kid, a late teenager, whatever. I didn't do it for very long, but this is the sport that I liked, So for the next 3 months, I committed to playing basketball on my own for an hour every day. I subscribed to some place that would rent me half a court in Dublin. And it was just me and myself for an hour for the next 3 months. And I was, man, that was painful, for somebody who's not in their body. And, but I forced myself to do it. Eventually, somehow I would, somehow, I don't know how it happened, but I ended up meeting people who were playing in that court, people who've booked the whole court, or maybe some people who saw me play. But eventually I ended up playing with others, I don't know how long I did that, but slowly it developed into, organized teams, pick up basketball in the court, and eventually, in the beginning, it was fun. And I loved that. I loved that it was fun, and I could joke and I could just like, who gives a fuck if I win or lose? By design, I'm not competitive. I don't like competitiveness. I don't like to beat others, because they'll feel bad. And I don't like to lose either, I even have it in chess, So today, like, I look at chess and I don't want to play, but I enjoy looking at chess. So that issue of competitive versus non-competitive, and whether it sits well with my spirit, permeates all of my contexts. That's why I love music and I love being in an environment where there's no competition. But with sport, it's tricky. It's tricky because if I'm in a situation and it's understood that we want to have fun and we don't give a shit about the score, I love that shit. But here's what happened. So initially I was renting the court, and then it developed into a group, and then it was fun. And then some people started to come in who were so serious about the sport and so pissed off. And some of them come from, there were a couple of 2 or 3 American guys who I loved as people, but they come from a completely different culture, having played, and it was a mixed group. Like some of, like I wasn't great and I wasn't the worst. And then you had these players. So there are some American guys who were very serious about it and very good about it. But then there were like a couple of this Corrado from Italy, who's an amazing player, not very tall, but an amazing player. And then Rodrigue from Spain, he was so fucking tall. And they were both okay with me wanting to have fun. I would sometimes do a certain shoot which was unlikely to go in, but sometimes it would go in. They didn't give a shit. They were amazing players and didn't give a shit about winning. And then there were these other players who were great people, really nice people. And the game started to change, and there was an influx. There was just more people coming in. And then it started to get really tough internally for me, with all of this tension, and I wanted to keep on pushing myself. And I remember there was a situation once where like I would have these intrusive thoughts, like in the middle of the game, with all this tension, I would end up getting these images that I fell, and I would get an image of a broken leg and the bone coming out, So that's what the tension was doing to me, and things started to go difficult, in the divorce case maybe, or maybe before that, I don't know, or maybe my own shit. I remember a couple of occasions like taking time out, going to the toilet, crying to release all this fucked up shit that was coming up from internally, and then going back into the game. Eventually it was like, man, this is not fun for me anymore. And I stopped, So for me, any kind of body work, if it has to do with other people and contact with other people, number one is vibe for me, whether it's a fun vibe or not. I am clear with myself. I do not like competitive settings. And at the same time, I respect people who need that and want that and are very clear about it. I respect them. These guys there's one guy from the Philippines who was amazing, and also not just the two American guys. That's what they need. That's how they let off steam. That's what they need, and that's what I need. If it involves others, it needs to be fun and uncompetitive. So right now I don't have that setting. And right now I'm not playing basketball. It needs to exist out there. So all the body work that I'm doing today, it's not sporty, and it's on my own, and I'm generally dissociated, and I need to go back to it. So again, there is so much out there, and there are so many complexities about different situations. It's just about trying to find out what works for me. Fun, uncompetitive, and a loving atmosphere. And I should see Corrado and Rodrigue again soon.